I came to Montana with 3 children, 2 trunks, and something to prove, though I couldn't have told you to whom. The abandoned homestead sat at the edge of the valley, scrubby and stubborn. The kind of land everyone said was too difficult for a woman alone. That was 6 months ago. 6 months of proving them wrong. One sunrise at a time. The morning air had teeth in Montana. I'd learned that fast. The cold bit through my nightgown as I lit the stove, the cast iron pot already filled with water for coffee. The cabin creaked and settled around me, familiar now in ways I hadn't expected. Emma's footsteps sounded on the wooden floor above, always the first to wake. My serious 12-year-old who carried responsibility like it was hers to bear. Mama, her voice drifted down the ladder. Is it time? Almost, I said, pouring coffee into my chipped mug. The bitter smell filled the small space. Wake your brother and sister. I stepped onto the porch while they dressed. Dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in shades I had no names for. My wheat field stretched before me thin, barely ankle-high. But mine, ours. We'd planted every seed, watered every row, pulled every weed. The satisfaction of that work settled in my chest like warmth. Emma emerged first, already dressed, her braid neat. James followed, 9 years old and all elbows and knees, stumbling slightly on the threshold. May came last, my 6-year-old dreamer, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. Today we check the north field, I told them, leading them across the yard. Emma, what are we looking for? Soil moisture, she answered promptly, and signs of pest damage. I nodded, watching her crouch beside a wheat sprout, her fingers testing the earth with practiced care. My father's hands, I thought, my teaching. James knelt beside a different row, examining the leaves for brown spots, remembering without being told. May hummed softly as she walked between the rows, her small hand trailing over the tops of the plants. This one's thirsty, Mama, she called out. And she was right. I watched James crouch beside a wheat sprout, his small fingers gentle, my father's hands, my teaching. That felt like success, like maybe I hadn't failed them by dragging them west. Maybe I'd given them something after all, a chance, a future built by their own hands. Mama used to say the earth would teach you back if you listened, I told them, repeating words my own mother had spoken to me a lifetime ago. I'd listened. The earth had taught me that nothing comes easy, but everything worth having requires patience. We finished the inspection and returned to the cabin for breakfast. I set out 4 plates, just 4. The number felt right, felt safe, felt like a boundary I could control. I served cornmeal mush and the last of the bacon, rationing without mentioning it. The children ate hungrily, chattering about their plans for the day. Sometimes, when they slept, I'd sit on the porch and wonder if this was all there was. Then I'd remind myself it was enough. It had to be. I'd learned early that the only person you could count on was yourself. Everyone else. They left. They died. They disappointed. My husband had proven that. Dying and leaving me with 3 children and debts I couldn't pay. I'd sold everything, packed what remained, and come west, started over. Built this life from nothing but determination and stubbornness. The wheat was thin, barely ankle-high, but it was mine, ours. We'd planted every seed, watered every row, pulled every weed. I took pride in that, in the dirt under my nails, in the strength of my back, in my children learning to survive. I didn't know then that a man was watching from the fence line, or that he'd been watching for weeks. Didn't know my careful life of 4 was about to become something I couldn't predict or control. All I knew that morning was the satisfaction of dirt under my nails and my children learning to survive. That had to be enough. It had to be. I first noticed Cole Garrison on a Tuesday in late May. Not because he arrived, turns out he'd been there all along. I noticed because Emma pointed, "Mama, there's someone watching us." The prickle started at the back of my neck. I straightened from the irrigation ditch, shading my eyes against the morning sun. A man sat on horseback at the fence line that bordered my property, maybe 50 yards away. Even from that distance, I could tell he was comfortable in the saddle. At ease with the waiting. His ranch sprawled beside mine, prosperous and green where mine was scrubby and stubborn. Cole Garrison. I knew the name. Everyone in the valley did. Wealthy, established. The kind of man who owned more land than most people could walk across in a day. "Keep working," I told Emma, my voice flat. I figured he was waiting to watch me fail. Men like him wealthy. Established, they didn't think women belonged out here proving themselves. Or maybe he was just bored. Rich men's entertainment watching poor women struggle. Over the next week, I kept catching him there. Morning lessons, afternoon watering, evening checks. He was always at the fence line. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther. But always watching. I started to resent his presence, then started to expect it, then caught myself looking for him. That made me angry. "Who is that man?" "Mama see," James asked one morning. "That's Mr. Garrison," I said, my voice harsher than I meant. "He owns the big ranch." "Can we meet him?" May asked, her voice bright with curiosity. "We're not here to make friends," I snapped. "We're here to work." Emma gave me that look, the one that said she knew I was afraid. Not angry. I turned away before she could say anything. I'd gotten used to being invisible. Widows with children. People looked past us, through us. Cole Garrison looked directly at me, and it felt like standing in sunlight after months of shade uncomfortable. Exposing? Part of me wanted to march over and tell him to stop watching. Another part, small, quiet, wondered what he saw. Did he see failure? Or did he see what I saw in the mirror? On good days, someone fighting, surviving, maybe even succeeding one morning. He tipped his hat to me. Just that a simple gesture across 50 yards of fence line. I nodded back, curt and cold. Turned away before I could see his reaction. Before I could wonder why my heart was beating faster. I told myself it was irritation. Told myself his attention meant nothing. But that night, lying awake in the dark, I admitted the truth. I cared what he thought. That made me furious with myself. That fence line between our properties felt like more than barbed wire. It was the border between his world and mine, between his certainty and my daily struggle to prove I belonged. Here, I intended to keep it that way. Intentions. I'd learn. Weren't the same as outcomes. By mid-June, the drought arrived like an unwelcome guest who wouldn't leave. The ground cracked into puzzle pieces. The creek that fed my irrigation ditch trickled to a whisper. Then, silence. My wheat, our wheat, began to curl at the edges, brown creeping up green like a slow death. I worked longer hours, teaching the children to mulch, to pray for rain. We rationed water from the rain barrel, used every drop twice. I worked until my hands bled. Told myself effort could replace water. The land didn't care about my effort. Emma stopped asking questions about the wheat. James grew quiet. May cried one morning when I told her we couldn't wash her doll's dress. We needed the water for drinking. I held her and felt my heart crack. I wouldn't lose this crop. I couldn't. Not after we'd come this far. One evening, as I sat exhausted on the porch, I heard hoofbeats. Cole Garrison rode toward my fence line, stopped at the boundary. Respectful distance. Always respectful. "Mrs. Morgan," he called out, "I have a proposition." I bristled. Propositions from wealthy men rarely ended well for women like me. I stood, crossed my arms. "We're managing—" He dismounted, hooked his thumbs in his belt. "Are you?" His voice was gentle. Not challenging. That made it worse. Made it harder to maintain my anger. "My creek runs stronger," he continued. "Fed by mountain runoff. I'd like to offer you irrigation access." "I don't need charity," I said automatically. "Not charity. Partnership." He paused, seemed to choose his words carefully. "My grandmother used to say the best farmers share knowledge. Seems to me you're teaching those children things I never learned about respecting the land." Oh, I wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell him we'd be fine, that we didn't need anyone. But the words stuck in my throat. 5 other families around here are struggling too. Cole added, "Been thinking about a cooperative system, pool resources, share irrigation, if you're interested." 5 families. Not just me. That made it harder to refuse and easier to consider. If I was doing this for others, maybe it wasn't weakness. "I'll think about it." I managed. He nodded once, mounted his horse. "Offer stands." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked to the field, touched the dying wheat, remembered similar nights after my husband died. Lying awake, wondering how I'd feed 3 children. I'd promised myself then that I'd never depend on anyone again. But I'd also promised my children I'd keep them safe. Which promise mattered more? It wasn't accepting help that terrified me. It was what came after the debt, the obligation, the slow erosion of independence until you were someone's burden, someone's charity case. But May had asked me that morning if the plants would die. I'd said no. I'd lied. What kind of mother chose pride over her children's future? At dawn, I walked to Cole's fence line. He was already there, like he'd been waiting. "Your offer," I said, my voice rough from a sleepless night. "The cooperative system, I'm in." He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just nodded once. "We start tomorrow." I turned back toward my struggling wheat, feeling something shift inside me. Not relief. Not yet. Just the strange sensation of a door I'd nailed shut beginning to open. The first week we worked in near silence. I'd say pipe. He'd hand it to me. He'd measure depth. I'd nod approval. The children watched us like we were a puzzle they couldn't solve. Cole brought equipment from his ranch, stronger pipe, better fittings, tools I'd never been able to afford. We dug new channels, connected my ditch to his water source, extended lines to reach the 5 other struggling farms in the valley. The work was hard. I insisted on doing my share, refused to stand back and watch. If this was partnership, I'd pull my weight. Cole didn't argue, didn't try to take over, just worked alongside me, his presence steady and undemanding. On the 3rd afternoon, he arrived with lemonade for the children, set the jar down without fanfare, poured out 3 cups. Emma thanked him shyly. He asked her about her planting techniques, actually listened to a 12-year-old girl's opinions, asked what she'd observed about soil drainage, about root depth. Emma explained, her voice growing more confident with each sentence. Men didn't do that. Not the men I'd known. They talked, instructed, corrected. Cole listened. James started following him around like a shadow, asking questions about ranching, about horses, about everything, Cole answered patiently. But every time James called him smart or skilled, Cole redirected, "Your mama's the real expert here." He'd say, "I'm still learning." It confused me. I didn't know what to do with kindness that didn't want control in return. By the second week, we'd expanded the cooperative to include Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Chen, the O'Brien family, and 2 others. I called a meeting at my kitchen table, laid out maps and schedules. Cole attended, but didn't dominate. When Mrs. Patterson shared her knowledge of weather patterns, he deferred to her. When Mr. Chen suggested a rotation schedule, Cole nodded and took notes. I'd expected him to take over rich men, always did, instead. He learned instead of lectured. One evening, as we finished checking the last irrigation line, Cole asked, "How'd you learn to teach so patiently?" The question caught me off guard. "My mother," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "She taught me the land would teach you back if you listened." Cole smiled, slow. "Genuine?" My grandmother said nearly the same thing. I turned away, pretending to check an irrigation valve, but really hiding the fact that his smile had done something to my carefully maintained defenses. Something dangerous. Something I didn't want to name. Over the next weeks, a rhythm developed. Cole would arrive each morning, work alongside me and the children. We'd break for lunch, usually cold biscuits and whatever vegetables we had. The children would chatter. Cole would listen, and I'd watch him with them, seeing gentleness I hadn't expected. I caught myself setting out 5 plates for breakfast one morning, then quickly put the 5th away. "Old habits," I muttered. But May saw, "Is that for Mr. Cole?" "No," I said too quickly. "Maybe. I don't know." I realized I was starting to rely on him. Not need I never needed anyone. But rely, expect, anticipate. Those words felt dangerously close to depend. And depend was a word I'd crossed out of my vocabulary years ago. I'd expected him to be like other wealthy men, entitled, dismissive, waiting for gratitude. But Cole worked as hard as he supervised, shared credit freely, treated me like an equal. It unsettled me. This gap between who I'd assumed he was and who he seemed to be. 6 weeks after we'd started the irrigation cooperative, I watched Cole teach James how to gentle a nervous horse. His patience, his quiet voice, the way he let my son try and fail and try again without judgment. I turned away before I could name what I was feeling. Some recognitions were too dangerous to acknowledge out loud. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in July. I was checking the north irrigation line when I heard May scream. That sound, every mother knows it. The difference between surprise and pain, between startled and hurt. My heart stopped, then hammered. I ran, boots slipping on loose dirt, my mind racing through worst scenarios. I arrived to find Cole already there, kneeling in the barn, holding May gently. Her knee was scraped, bleeding slightly, but she was more frightened than hurt. Tears streaked her dusty face. "You're all right, little one," Cole was saying, his voice soft. "Just a scare. Your mama's coming. May." I dropped beside them, reaching for her. Cole handed her over carefully, his hands steady. She fell from the loft, just scraped her knee, but she got frightened. I held May, checked her over with shaking hands. She was fine. She was fine. But something in me shattered anyway. All the accumulated stress, months of vigilance, fear, struggling alone crashed over me like a wave. I started crying and couldn't stop. I'd survived my husband's death, dry-eyed. Had packed our life into 2 trunks without tears. Had faced drought and doubt and 100 small disasters without cracking. But Cole's gentleness with my daughter broke something I'd worked so hard to keep intact. "Emma," Cole said quietly, "take May inside. Get her cleaned up." Emma took her sister, gave me one worried look, then left. Cole walked me to the porch, sat me down. Didn't touch me, didn't crowd me, just waited. "I'm sorry," I managed between sobs. I don't do this. You don't have to carry everything alone. Sarah." First time he'd used my first name. The intimacy of it nearly broke me again. "I've always carried it alone," I whispered. "It's what I know." He leaned back against the porch railing, giving me space. "My parents died when I was young. Grandmother raised me, taught me ranching, but also taught me something else." He paused. "She used to say that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Knowing when you need others, that's strength." I wiped my face with my sleeve. Embarrassed. "I'm terrified," I admitted, the words raw, "of depending on someone and having them leave. Or stay and take over. Make me small." "I'm not trying to take over," Cole said carefully. "I'm not trying to make you anything other than what you are. I'm trying to be a neighbor, maybe a friend, if you'd let me." Something in me wanted to believe him, wanted to lean just a little and see if the world would hold me up. "I don't know how," I said finally. "Start small," he suggested. "Let me help James with his reading after supper sometimes. Let me bring extra milk when our cow's producing more than we can use. Let me show up. Sarah, that's all I'm asking." I'd thought crying in front of someone meant defeat. But sitting on that porch, emptied out and exhausted, I felt lighter. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and finally exhaled. "Sunday," I heard myself say. "Come for Sunday dinner?" His smile was like sunrise. "I'd like that." That night, May asked if Mr. Cole was family now. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because part of me wanted to say yes. And that terrified me more than anything Montana had thrown at us so far. I wanted to trust him. Wanted to believe his gentleness was real. That his help didn't come with strings. That he saw me as capable even when I was crying on my own porch. Wanting felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down. Sunday came. Cole arrived with wildflowers for the table and a book about astronomy for James. "We ate roast chicken and vegetables from our surviving garden." The children chattered. Cole listened. I watched them all and thought, This is what I'd been afraid of. Not Cole taking over, but me wanting him to stay. The difference. I was learning. Was everything. The second drought wave hit in early August. Even with irrigation, Coles Creek dropped to a concerning trickle. I stood at the banks at dawn, watching water that wasn't water anymore, just a slow-moving promise that might run out. The cooperative families were counting on this water. On me, on the system we'd built together. Fear tasted like dust in my mouth. I called an emergency meeting at my kitchen table. All 5 families crowded into my small cabin, Mrs. Patterson with her worry lines, Mr. Chen with his careful calculations, the O'Briens with their quiet desperation. Cole stood in the corner, present but not presiding. We need priorities, I said, laying it out plain. Drinking water first, vegetables second, wheat last. Mrs. Patterson's face crumpled. The wheat's my income. If I lose it, if we lose the drinking water, income won't matter. I said gently. I understand your fear. I feel it too. But panic won't save any of us. Mr. Chen worried about his investment. The O'Briens exchanged glances, their children watching from the doorway. Everyone was afraid. Everyone was looking at me. The weight of 5 families' hope pressed on my shoulders. I didn't let it show. We survived together, I said, meeting each person's eyes. Or we don't survive at all. Cole stepped forward then. Sarah's right. We follow her plan. He could have taken over. His ranch, his creek, his resources, instead. He turned to me. What do you need from us? It wasn't the words that mattered. It was the deference, the respect. He was choosing to follow my lead. I'd never had that from a man before. We created a rotation schedule, drew lots for who got water on which days, agreed to share what we had: vegetables, milk, eggs, agreed to check on each other's children if someone needed to travel for supplies, agreed to be a community, not just neighbors sharing a ditch. 2 days later, trouble came from outside. A neighboring rancher, not part of the cooperative, tried to divert water illegally, set up his own channel in the night, stole from our already limited supply. Cole caught him at dawn, confronted him. I heard the raised voices and ran. This water's for everyone, Cole was saying, his voice hard. Everyone who can pay for it, the rancher shot back. Not a bunch of charity cases and some widow playing farmer. That's when I stepped between them. The West was built by people helping each other, I said. My voice steady, despite my racing heart. Not fighting over scraps like dogs. We're offering you a place in the cooperative. Share the work, share the water, share the harvest, or walk away and manage on your own. But don't steal from families who are already struggling. The rancher looked at me, then at Cole, then at the other families who'd gathered. He saw women and children, saw decent people trying to survive, saw himself as the villain in this story. He backed down, removed his illegal channel, left without another word. Cole and I spent the rest of the day rerouting water, checking every connection, hard work under hot sun. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. Our hands knew the same rhythms. Our minds worked toward the same goals. At sunset, we sat exhausted on my porch. The children were inside, preparing supper. You're remarkable, Cole said quietly. The way you brought those families together. I was uncomfortable with praise, never knew what to do with it. I just did what needed doing. That's what makes it remarkable. I looked at him then. Really looked. Saw the dust on his face, the tiredness in his eyes, the respect that never wavered. When had I stopped seeing Cole as an outsider? He'd become part of my planning, my problem solving, my days, not just in them, but woven through them. I caught myself thinking we instead of I. And the shift didn't frighten me the way it should have. I'd never thought of myself as a leader, a survivor. Yes, a fighter, certainly. But someone others looked to, that was new. And with Cole supporting, rather than competing, it felt possible, natural, even that night. I watched Cole ride back to his ranch in the fading light. Watched until his silhouette disappeared beyond the fence line that didn't feel like a border anymore. Watched and admitted to myself what I'd been denying for weeks. I was falling for him. Not the desperate, dependent falling I'd feared, but the kind built on respect, partnership, and the slow accumulation of 100 small moments that added up to something I didn't have a name for yet. Trust, maybe, or love. I packed our trunks on a moonless night in late August. The children slept upstairs. Unaware their mother was planning escape. Again. Always again. My hands shook as I folded Emma's dresses, wrapped James's few treasures, gathered May's rag doll. The wheat would survive small harvest, but enough. We'd proven we could make it. So why did success feel like failure? It wasn't the land I was running from. Montana had been harsh but honest. I could handle honest. I was running from the way my heart lifted when Cole's horse appeared in the mornings, from the way I'd started imagining a fifth plate as permanent, from the terrifying realization that I'd stopped being just fine alone, that I wanted more, wanted him. And wanting felt like standing in an open field during a lightning storm, dangerous, foolish, inevitable disaster. I'd learned that love was a luxury for people who could afford loss. I'd already lost too much. Couldn't survive losing again. Wouldn't let myself be in a position to lose. As I packed, memories surfaced. My husband's death sudden. No warning, no goodbye. The coffin being lowered into frozen ground. Emma's hand in mine. Her small voice asking why Papa wouldn't wake up. James crying for weeks. May too young to understand, but crying because everyone else was crying. The years of rebuilding myself into someone who didn't need anyone. Who couldn't be hurt because she wouldn't let anyone close enough. I'd promised myself then that I'd never depend on anyone again. But I'd also promised my children I'd keep them safe. Which promise was I keeping by running? Which was I breaking? A voice in my head, sounding suspiciously, like my mother whispered, "You're not protecting yourself. Sarah, you're imprisoning yourself." I sat on the porch, prepared to load the wagon at dawn, leave before anyone woke, before I had to explain, before I had to see disappointment in Cole's eyes. Hoofbeats in the dark. Cole appeared like a ghost, dismounted quietly. "You're leaving?" Not a question. I couldn't lie. "I'm thinking about it." He sat on the porch steps, leaving space between us. Always respectful. Even now. Because of the drought. Because I'm falling for you. I whispered. And that terrifies me more than any drought ever could. The silence stretched. Somewhere, a coyote called. The wind moved through the wheat. "I can't promise nothing will go wrong, Sarah," Cole said finally. "Life's too uncertain for that, but I can promise I'll show up. Every day, for as long as you'll have me. I can promise I'll respect your strength even when you don't feel strong. I can promise your children will always have a home with me. Whether you choose me or not." He paused. "And I can promise that choosing to stay choosing to try that's not weakness. It's the bravest thing either of us will ever do. Something inside me broke. All the grief I'd been carrying for my husband, for the years of struggling alone, for the version of myself who believed love was too dangerous to risk poured out. I cried like I hadn't cried in years, deep, relieved sobs that shook my whole body. Cole didn't try to fix it or stop it, just sat beside me in the dark, his presence steady as stone. Sometimes, I learned then, the kindest thing someone can do is witness your pain without trying to solve it. When I could breathe again, I said, "What if I'm not brave enough?" "You're the bravest person I know," he answered. "You came here with 3 children and made life from dust." Letting someone in, that's just a different kind of courage. He'd promised to show up. Not to save me, not to take over, not to rescue, just to show up. Why did that feel like more than I'd ever been offered before I thought about Emma? Learning to be independent, but also learning it was okay to accept help. About James, needing a man who'd teach him strength didn't mean isolation. About May, who deserved to see her mother choose happiness, not just survival. What was I teaching them by running at dawn? I unpacked the trunks, hung Emma's dresses back in the wardrobe, returned James's treasures to his shelf, placed May's doll on her bed. Then I went to the kitchen and set out 5 plates for breakfast. Left them out, looked at that 5th plate, and thought courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing what matters more than the fear. I'd come to Montana to prove I could survive alone. Cole had shown me that maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to. 3 days before harvest, I woke before dawn and knew exactly what I wanted. The wheat was ready golden where it had been green, heavy-headed where it had been fragile. Small harvest, but sustaining, like everything else we'd built. I dressed quietly, made coffee, watched the sunrise paint the valley in shades of amber and rose. By the time the children woke, I'd made my decision. We're calling a meeting today. I told Emma. The whole cooperative. She smiled like she knew something I'd just figured out. The families gathered at noon. Mrs. Patterson brought fresh bread. Mr. Chen brought tea. The O'Briens brought their fiddle. My kitchen overflowed with people, with hope, with the messy, beautiful reality of community. We survived the drought together, I began, standing at the head of my own table. What if we made this permanent? Not just shared irrigation, but everything. Equipment, knowledge, labor. Through all seasons, joy, burden, harvest, hardship. Mrs. Patterson hugged me, tears in her eyes. Mr. Chen nodded thoughtfully, already calculating logistics. The O'Briens grinned. Everyone started talking at once, planning, dreaming, building something bigger than any of us could build alone. Cole stood in the corner, watching me with quiet pride. When the planning settled, he spoke. I'd like to contribute my barn for storage, my equipment for communal use. Not as a donation as my part of the cooperative, as an equal member. So this is what partnership looks like. I realized not one person giving and another receiving, but everyone contributing what they can. Receiving what they need equals in the truest sense. After the meeting, after the families left, still talking and planning, I asked Cole to walk with me. We went to the fence line, the boundary that once divided us. I spent 6 months trying to prove I didn't need anyone, I said, my hand on the weathered fence post. Built walls around myself, and my children. Around my heart. Called it strength. Called it survival. I turned to face him. The afternoon sun was warm on my face. The wheat moved in the breeze behind us, golden and alive. But you showed me something I'd forgotten, that strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing who to stand with. It's about building something that couldn't exist without partnership. My heart was racing. My hands were shaking. But I was certain. More certain than I'd ever been about anything. I'm asking you to stay, Cole. Not as my savior, I don't need saving. Not as my landlord or helper or even just my neighbor. As my partner in the cooperative. In this life we're building. In raising these children. In whatever comes next. If you'll have us. If you'll have me. I was terrified, but brave. This was the bravest thing I'd ever done, not surviving alone. But choosing to survive together. Cole stepped closer. Close enough that I could see gold flecks in his eyes, see the slight tremble in his hands. He was nervous too. Somehow that made it easier. Sarah, I've been yours since the first morning I watched you teach those children to respect the soil, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I just needed you to choose me back. He cupped my face gently, gave me time to pull away. I didn't. I leaned in. The kiss was gentle, sun-warmed, tasting of hope and harvest and home. When we broke apart, I laughed, actually laughed, and it felt like a door I'd kept locked had swung wide open, letting light flood into rooms I'd forgotten existed. I'd thought asking Cole to stay meant giving up control, but standing there, making my choice with clear eyes and open heart. I'd never felt more in control of my life. This wasn't surrender. It was sovereignty. The freedom to choose my future instead of letting fear choose it for me. I'd thought love was dangerous because it made you vulnerable. I'd been wrong. Love was dangerous because it made you brave enough to be vulnerable. And bravery, I was learning, was just fear that had made a choice. We walked back toward the house hand in hand, the fence line behind us. Ahead, I could see my children playing near the wheat field. Emma noticed us first. Elbowed James, who grinned. May started running toward us, arms wide. I knew it. She shrieked. I knew Mr. Cole would be our family. And maybe it was that simple. Maybe choosing love was just opening your arms and running toward it instead of away. Maybe courage was just the decision to try. Cole swept May up, spun her around while she squealed. Emma hugged me tight, whispered, I'm glad. Mama. James just grinned and asked Cole if this meant he could learn to rope cattle now. That evening, as the sun set and we prepared supper together, Cole chopping vegetables at my counter, children setting the table, everything loud and chaotic and perfect, I realized something profound. I'd come to Montana to prove I didn't need anyone. What I'd learned instead was that needing wasn't weakness. Choosing who to need. Building a life with someone who saw your worth and added to it rather than diminishing it. That was the real strength. The wheat would be harvested in 3 days. The cooperative was permanent. My children were happy. And the man I loved was helping my son set the table. Patient as always. Some harvests, I was learning, weren't measured in bushels. We married in October, after the harvest came in small but sustaining. Like everything else we'd built together, the cooperative families gathered at the homestead. Mrs. Patterson made her famous apple pie. Mr. Chen brought rice wine from his family's recipe. The O'Briens brought their fiddle and played while we danced. Emma stood as my bridesmaid, proud and teary. James stood with Cole, serious with responsibility. May threw wildflowers and announced to everyone that she'd known all along. I wore my mother's dress, altered to fit. Something old. Cole wore his best suit, carried his grandmother's ring. Something borrowed from the past, given to our future. We said our vows under the Montana sky. Wheat fields stretching behind us, community surrounding us. I promised to choose him every day. He promised to show up. We promised to build something beautiful together. Cole moved into the homestead, brought his grandmother's furniture. We combined our lands, but kept my cabin as the center my choice. Honored without question. His wealth became our security. My knowledge became our foundation. The cooperative thrived. 7 families, now 2 more, had joined after word spread about what we'd built. I held weekly workshops on sustainable farming, water conservation, soil health. Cole attended every one, learned alongside newcomers. Sometimes the teacher became the student, and the student became the teacher, just like his grandmother had said. Emma started teaching the younger cooperative children, patient and thorough. James worked Cole's ranch, but still came to my lessons, bridging both worlds. May declared she'd be a farmer like Mama and a rancher like Daddy Cole. The future. Planted and growing. I still woke before dawn old habits. But now I'd find Cole already up. Coffee made, 6 plates set out instead of 5. Hoping we might add to this family someday, he'd said that first morning, shy and hopeful. I'd laughed, kissed him. One step at a time. Cowboy. But the possibility didn't frighten me. Nothing did. Not anymore. Or rather, fear still existed. But it didn't control me. I'd learned to be afraid and brave at the same time, to feel fear and make choices anyway. The woman who'd arrived in Montana with pride like armor would barely recognize the woman I'd become. Not softer, I was still strong, still capable, still independent, but open now, willing. Brave enough to need someone and wise enough to know that need and strength could coexist. My mother had taught me to read the soil. I was teaching my children and an entire cooperative to read more than that. To read the signs of community, the language of partnership. The wisdom in knowing when to stand alone and when to reach out. That lesson would outlive me. That harvest would keep multiplying. I'd come to Montana to prove something to a world that doubted me. What I found instead was a community that needed me, children who thrived in open spaces, and a man who saw my strength and wanted to build beside it, not over it. The land taught me patience. The drought taught me humility. Cole taught me that the strongest roots grow when they tangle with others. And I taught him, taught all of us, that accepting help with dignity amplifies rather than diminishes strength. That teaching others multiplies your own harvest. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't surviving alone, but choosing to survive together. On a morning in late October, I stood on my porch at sunrise, watching the cooperative come to life. Emma was teaching 3 younger children about winter preparation. James rode beside Cole, checking fence lines. May was helping Mrs. Patterson gather eggs. The O'Briens were arriving for the weekly meeting, carrying bread to share. Mr. Chen was already in the barn, inventorying shared equipment. My 4 plates had become a table that stretched the length of the porch, every seat full. Every heart welcome. I'd learned Montana's hardest lesson. The bravest thing you can do isn't surviving alone. It's choosing to survive together and teaching others to do the same. That morning, with coffee warm in my hands and Cole's voice calling me to breakfast. I finally understood what home meant. Not a place, not even people, but the choice to build something beautiful with others who see your worth. I'd spent so long protecting my heart. I'd forgotten hearts were meant to be used, meant to break open and spill over, meant to make room for more love than you thought possible, meant to teach you that sometimes the greatest harvest isn't what you grow in fields, but what you grow in people, in yourself, in your children, in a community built on trust and shared struggle and the decision to show up for each other. The wheat would grow again next spring. The cooperative would expand. My children would learn and teach and grow. Cole would be beside me through all of it, partner in the truest sense. And every morning, I would wake grateful for the courage it took to unpack those trunks, to set out that fifth plate, to choose love over fear. That was harvest enough for any lifetime.